Hey there, Metalheads, Flying V here, and today I'm going to review the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis was Sega's technically second home video game console, released in 1988 as the Sega Mega Drive in Japan, released in 1989 as the Genesis in North America, and I believe that same year as the Mega Drive in Europe, and probably 1990 in Australia as the Mega Drive. I don't know that for sure, but that's just a rough estimate. Hopefully it's true. Let me know in the comments. So, the console sold 30.75 million units worldwide, making it the, I believe, 9th most successful game system ever produced. I could have gotten that wrong. Let me know in the comments. And this console also proved that you didn't have to be called Nintendo to make a successful piece of video game hardware, which paved the way for a lot of other companies, to make those weird, obscure game consoles in, like, the 4th generation, those companies were like, hey, there's room for a 3rd guy in there, so they tried all their own little different ideas and strategies, and none of them really turned out the way they wanted it to be, unlike Sony with the PlayStation. But I know, I went over that already. You can find my PlayStation review on my video list, okay? That's a whole nother story, okay? So anyways, enough of that. The Genesis had 3 models. There's the big Model 1, which had like a headphone jack. And then there's the Model 2, which is much smaller than the Model 1. Instead of having a power switch and reset button, it had a really simple, small power button and reset button. And then there's a Model 3 Sega Genesis, which is even smaller than this one. However, the only downside to that one is it doesn't support RGB SCART, okay? The Models 1 and 2 of the Sega Genesis will support RGB SCART if you happen to have one of those cables, like the PS1, okay? No modification required if you want to use RGB SCART, okay? So that's cool. Now, I think I've said enough about the history of it. I believe this console ceased production in, like, 1996 or 7. Right around the same time that Sega dropped the Sega Saturn, okay? The other thing is that the Sega Genesis, while it was very successful in North America and Europe, Japan was a whole different story. It really wasn't that successful in Japan, so Sega Japan wanted to get rid of the Genesis as quickly as they possibly could. But of course, bad internal communication, morons, and some other thing ultimately led to the fall of Sega after the Dreamcast. But anyways, that's a story for another time. And I think I went off topic here. So anyways, I just want to show some of the features now. I think I've said enough history about it already, so there you go. So anyways, of course, your features, you got your power button here, your reset button, you got your 2 controller ports. I believe you can use Sega Master System controllers on the Sega Genesis. You can also get an accessory called the Sega Power Base Converter, where you basically like stick it in the cartridge slot here, and then you can play Sega Master System games through that power base. Okay, so yeah, there's a little LED here. Of course, like I said, the cartridge slot. I don't know how well it's gonna pick that up. I'm gonna have to like flip it over just so you can see it. I think you can kind of see it. So yeah, of course, when you go to the back here, see there's 2 ports. There's one for the AV multi-out and one for your power supply, okay? Of course, they had these obnoxious giant power bricks, which take up way too much room. Of course, you got your other connector here, which plugs into the back here. I also have an RF unit. Now, I know this is not the typical cable that most people would use in the Genesis. They'd probably use, a composite, but whatever, I have it, so that's cool. Of course, you got the connector that plugs in your TV here. Of course, it has the connector here, which plugs into the Genesis right here. I'll just turn this over. Oops. Never mind that. Of course, you have your antenna in. You have your channel 3 and channel 4 switch. Which, however, this one for some reason will only work with channel 3. It will not work with channel 4. I don't know why. But whatever. So those are the cables. Here's the original Genesis controller. Of course, you got your D-pad here, your start button, and your ABC buttons. However, I don't really like this controller, okay? While I can reach all the buttons fine, I find it to be a very uncomfortable controller, okay? I don't really like the way this controller is molded, but if you like it, it's perfectly fine. It's your opinion, okay? This is not a Sega hatred thing, okay? Trust me. Just push this back here. Here, of course, is the controller connector. Controllers plug in there like that. Here's the 6-button Genesis controller. Like always, it has the D-pad, start button, ABC buttons, but also has the XYZ buttons, which I guess were the turbo buttons for A, B, and C. So that's cool. Yeah. And I do have a game with me. Let me just get it real quick. Here's a game. This is Troy Aikman football. The game just goes in there like that. You simply lift it up to pull it out like that. Yeah. I believe the Sega Genesis will play Japanese Mega Drive games. However, like the Nintendo 64, it has these weird tab things here, just so that North American games can fit in there. Okay, so if you can cut these little notches out, I believe you can play Sega Mega Drive games. Probably not European Mega Drive games, but at least Japanese stuff, okay? I may be wrong, let me know in the comments. So, anyways, that, I believe, is my review for the Sega Genesis, okay? Now, before I go here, you might ask, is it worth owning in 2017? Totally. It totally is. Okay, there are a lot of good games on here, and there are more violent versions of, let's say, the Mortal Kombat games, because, the Mortal Kombat games that came out on the Genesis and Super Nintendo, the Genesis versions were bloodier. Super Nintendo versions were more censored, okay? So, if you like bloody games, then the Genesis has that covered. So, yeah. I haven't really played on this console much, so I don't really have an opinion on this console. I'm actually only keeping this thing temporarily, but I just thought, why not have it just to do a review? Anyway, I think I went off topic there, so the short answer is yes, it's worth owning in 2017, okay? So, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, continue to support my channel, share the video. May the force be with you. Mosh hard.